Hey, what is up, all you lonely watchers out there? People, by nature, can be very opinionated, especially when they're really passionate about something. And not all opinions people hold are all that well received. That being said, lately I've been watching a lot of YouTuber Starstrike's Bold Banter Bonanza series, where he gives his thoughts and analysis on his fans' controversial opinions on the My Little Pony franchise. Now, while I did make a video on Yokai Watch hot takes a couple years ago, my audience was much smaller, and I did not receive too many submissions. So, I decided to ask my new YouTube community for their hot takes on the Yokai Watch franchise, accumulating over 50 responses within a single day. Now, I can't exactly talk about all of them here, but I picked out 9 of some of the more interesting ones to discuss. Starting with, dear Lord Enma. Wow, Mystic, you did not pull any punches. Daring to claim that Katie is superior to Haley? I can practically already hear the intense screaming from the audience already. Though I do not agree, I can understand this opinion, and please hear me out first. Just stop and ask yourself for a moment. Who is Haley? Well, she's very neurodivergent coded, very queer coded, and she's an excitable otaku girl who geeks out over anime and movies and space and aliens and things of that nature. In contrast, Nate, and by extension Katie in the first game, are blank slates, due to the fact they're meant to be relatable to the player. The second game tried to give them both a little more personality inspired by the anime, but they still had to keep their dialogue very similar so they wouldn't have to write 2 completely different scripts depending on what gender you picked in the game. This means that by the time Yokai Watch 3 came around, Nate and by extension Katie's characters were extremely sanitized, even though Katie barely appears in 3. This makes Haley's character not only more unique, but far more relatable to a majority of the Yokai Watch fandom. But then again, not everyone likes the hyper otaku girl archetype. Japan is infamous for disliking her character, even up to the point that she got removed from all future Yokai Watch media, despite the fact that her dynamic partner, Usapion, remained. That on top of Katie developing her own more sweet and empathetic character in the anime and Yokai Watch 4, may make her more preferable to some. Great hot take to start out with. And a quick reminder to everyone to please remain civil in the comments. There is no such thing as a wrong opinion besides that one. Next is, ooh, look, another Mystic. Anyway, Mystic Aiden says, Slimamander from Yokai Watch 1 is the best boss fight in the entire series. Not in scale or difficulty or anything like that. It's a well-designed boss fight that teaches the mechanics of the game. While a good tutorial segment is often underappreciated in game design, it doesn't always make the tutorial the greatest element of said game design. People often claim that World 1-1 is the best Mario level of all time because how well it teaches the player how the game works. But I wouldn't call it the most fun level to play in the game, not by a long shot. I will admit though that Slimamander is one of the best bosses in the series either way, especially in Yokai Watch 1. Right up there with Dr. Madaman and Wobble Walk. His boss fight is just really well designed and fun, even outside the tutorial context. Gavin writes that Katie should have canonically gotten a Yokai Watch, which she does. Kinda. Yokai Watch 4 does finally give Katie a watch alongside Nate, but to be honest, she feels kind of forced into the story here, both thematically and literally. I feel like the alternate universe stuff for 1, 2, and 3 works fine, but she definitely could have worked well as a watcher in the anime if they decided to give her her own segment. I mean, we got 1 episode of this, but it leaves much to be desired. On a related note, Divine Fool writes that Katie's watch should have been a bow or a ring instead of a neck-breaking quote-unquote pocket watch. I agree that the pocket watch is dumb, but for a different reason. I always hated that Katie was singled out for the longest time by being given a pocket watch because, I don't know, I guess girls just can't wear wristwatches. They're too masculine and manly. I like the colors and patterns of this watch way more than Nate's. I just wish it was a wristwatch instead. Thankfully, this mistake was corrected for Haley, Summer, and eventually Katie by the time she got her Canon watch. Too bad it wasn't super girly or even unique to her though, but I'll take what I can get. Moving on, Colbury Jack suggests that there should be more Jibanyan clones instead of less, and yeah, I just cannot understand this one, I'm sorry. The series should have capped out on Nyans by the second game. And even then, you could probably still get rid of some, like Jibanyan S, the Fruit Nyans, and all the Jewel Nyans besides Dianyan. Really, all 5 of these guys were not necessary. While 3 does add some cool new Nyans, like Originyan and Tamanyan, most of the new Nyans are either lame, like Chocobo Nyan and Terminyanyator, or they're just Jibanyan in a costume. Which looks cute, but they didn't all need their own medallion slots. I would have preferred if a lot of these Nyans were reduced to costumes like how the Blaster and Treasure variants work in Yokai Watch Busters 2, while also not taking up a medallion slot like Blizzy in the original Yokai Watch Blasters. Also, all the S variants should have been removed in Yokai Watch 3, since the new prestigious treasure item can raise any yokai's rank that isn't already at rank S. But at the very least, I think we should have gotten some more Komainu variants to balance out the list. Komasan and Komajiro are far cuter than Jibanyan, and criminally underrated when it comes to medallion representation. Quirky Workings proposes that yokai who evolve via leveling up would have been better as fusions to both keep players from wasting their time training up weak yokai in battles, and to make Yokai Watch more distinct from Pokemon. And honestly, this sounds like a great idea on paper, but not so much in practice. Fusion is way less prevalent in Pokemon games, but do you ever stop to think of why that is? Not only would that be a ton more work on the developer's part, but turning every evolution into a fusion would be a nightmare for the medallion, as you would need hundreds of fusion items and random yokai combinations to complete it. Fusions are a cool concept, but they're not very practical on such a large scale, such as a monster catching game with anywhere from 200 to 700 unique monsters. Also, if no yokai evolved from leveling, there would be way less incentive to fight with lower rank yokai, since they'd have way less upward mobility. Evolving a yokai by leveling isn't a burden, but rather a great incentive to use them more in battle and bond with them. Pretty much every game in this genre has some form of evolution for this very reason. As confusing and nonsensical as Digimon evolution can be, it's a necessary evil. Being unique isn't always worth sacrificing what works. Jared Phelps says using QR codes to get Crank-a-Kai coins feels like cheating, letting you easily obtain S-rank yokai super early in the game. Yeah, this is also one I have to hard agree with. This is a big problem seen with toy integration for video games in general. For example, Nintendo's Amiibo. Nintendo constantly faces criticism for what these figures do in-game. They either end up giving you stuff so inconsequential that they debate if it's even worth the price, or they end up giving you something so substantial, it essentially locks a crucial feature behind an Amiibo paywall. QR codes in the Yokai Watch franchise can be a massive pay-to-win, and in some cases, they're literally required to play some quests or obtain some yokai. And while QR codes are easy to archive on the internet, NFC codes from the Y medals and yokai keystones are much harder to preserve and emulate. This can make it extremely difficult to do things like complete the medallion when said toys inevitably stop being produced. And I think I have a pretty decent solution. Maybe, when you scan the QR code on the back of the yokai's medal, it can instead give you something small like said yokai's favorite food, as well as the rare chance to get a more useful item like a doll or a fusion item or something of that sort. Something that's a useful and cool bonus but can also easily be obtained elsewhere in the game. It would still reward players who buy the toys without locking content for those who don't. Also, the Wandroid tribe is the best tribe, besides Charming. How dare you? Quip Onion or Kip Onion? I don't know. Something Onion says, Yokai Watch 1 should be skipped by newcomers. It has nothing that its sequel doesn't have. Yet again, this is something I can kind of understand. Yokai Watch 2 is where the real story picks up, as it mostly pretends that Yokai Watch 1 never even happened. But Yokai Watch 1 isn't totally pointless, as it has some elements that do become important later in the series, such as the stories of Lucas and McCracken. I wouldn't recommend newcomers skip the game, but I wouldn't recommend they 100% it or the medallion either. Playing through just the story is more than enough before moving on to Yokai Watch 2. But even if you don't want to do that, at least start 2 with the general knowledge of what unfolds in the first game. I think Yokai Watch 1's story has a lot of appeal in how generally down-to-earth and self-contained it is. It's a perfect snapshot of the early days of Yokai Watch and strongly parallels the anime in its storytelling, making it not only unique to the franchise, but RPGs as a whole. And finally, Shiny Rowlet 1 says, Yokai Watch 3 is the epitome of quantity over quality. Yes! Finally, someone said it! The characters are unmemorable, the story is a lot worse with not as many good or sad moments, and a lot of the designs are worse than past Yokai Watch games. The map is okay, but way too big, and the Buster side mode is fun but feels unfinished. Still a good game, but it was definitely a step down. And I agree. While the game is still an S tier, it is definitely at the bottom of S tier. Buck and Haley alone carried the game's story on their backs, as they were the only new characters that were all that fun to be around. I'd even go as far as to say Nate's side of the story would be unbearable without Buck accompanying him. The game goes on for at least 5 hours too long, being especially slow at the beginning and end, as opposed to Yokai Watch 1 and 2, which definitely had some duller moments, but ended right when they should have. The amount of side quests and post-game content in 3 is also way too much, with a lot of it simply feeling like filler. One of the main things I love about Yokai Watch 2 and 4 is that they both have clear post-game goals and modes which give you something to work towards, as opposed to Yokai Watch 3's post-game which feels very bloated and directionless. It's the only mainline game I gave up on right after completing the story, and it's the only Yokai Watch story that I dread replaying. But hey, look at my Originyan! His name is Twinknyan, isn't he so cute? Woo! I've gotta say, even though I didn't agree with all of them, y'all left some unique and pretty well-formed opinions, and I quite enjoyed this little adventure. Maybe we could even revisit this subject in the future for a part 2. That being said, what are some of your most spicy takes on the Yokai Watch franchise? Make sure to let me know in the comments below, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye bye, my lonely watchers.